Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the End of Life Journey and Beyond, the Sands of Time. My name is Lisa Strahs-Lorenc, and I am a Bereavement Support Specialist. Hello, Susan. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Lisa. So nice to see you this morning. Happy to be back. You're away, right? So we skipped a day there, but very happy to be back today. We have a very special guest. So my name is Susan Capurso. I'm an end-of-life doula and legacy specialist. And Lisa, you're going to do the intro today.
I am, and this is what happens when you run into somebody. You never know who you're going to know. So I
No,
have known,
surprises every day.
it's true. So I've known Lisa Pomerantz. She is an attorney, and I've known her for many years. We ran into each other and we realized what a great opportunity for her to share her expertise. I'll give you a little background about her. She provides legal dispute resolution and training services to startups, emerging enterprises, employers, and nonprofits to help them achieve commercial success, manage risk, and resolve conflict amicably and cost effectively. However, her real specialty is arbitration and mediation disputes for the American Arbitration Association. I know her from SCWBEC, which is the Suffolk County Women's Business Executive Coalition, Enterprise Coalition. And she also is very involved with the community. She has created a community of the informed. She has a monthly newsletter, Making the Connection, and discusses legal and dispute resolution issues. So for us today, her issue is really about the aging process and addressing some of the conflicts that come up with families, and how to protect the person who is aging and maintaining family harmony. Not easy. I hear all kinds of stories about this. So everybody's getting all crazy and all, involved with their interests and self-interest, etc. So we need this, Lisa. So help us out to deal with this challenging issue. Thank you and welcome.
Welcome, Lisa. Very important topic.
It,
Very.
it really is. And I would say that family conflict in the aging process is almost the rule rather than the exception. And I think it's important for people to understand that as people age, they actually need to make a lot of changes in their lives. And those changes are challenging. They have to make important decisions about when they're going to retire, how they want to dispose of their estates, how they want to plan for healthcare decision making, where they want to live. If they have a family business, they have to decide what are they going to do with it? Are they going to pass it down to the next generation? Are they going to sell? What happens if some children are interested in the business and not others? They have to decide, when should I give up driving? So a lot of very important decisions need to be made, and they can be overwhelming. And at the same time, as people age, they start to lose their capacity for making decisions and executing on them. And many of these decisions actually either involve other people or affect other people. People as they age may need different kinds of assistance and support from spouses, siblings, children, the community. And so those people who are affected, often have their own interests, and it happens within married couples, especially. So, and even though it's a good thing to be able to prepare, it's also hard to prepare because we really don't know what the future holds as far as how will our health hold up and what kind of living, situation would be best for us. And what should we do if one spouse needs more care or needs to be in a different kind of living circumstance than the other. So, these are very difficult problems, and almost every family faces them. And so, rather than run away or have estrangement, I think it's important to acknowledge that these are difficult issues and think about both what the individual can do ahead of time to prevent conflict from arising, and what strategies there are for families who find themselves in conflict for, helping to resolve those conflicts. I know that was kind of a long-winded answer.
Yeah.
No, it was wonderful and it was so detailed. And the whole time I'm thinking, Lisa, you need to put a book together, a booklet, just with these types of questions, because aging is so complicated, and it's scaring me as I'm getting older because there's so much to think about. 2 days a week, Lisa, I work for an attorney, an estate planning attorney. And that's a complicated process, just putting all of those important documents together. This seems like a whole different entity, to bring in all of these important topics and questions for family, because
Yes,
it's stressful.
it is very stressful. I mean, and people can have different expectations or preferences. It could be that the person who is aging wants to stay in their home, okay, or they want to move in with their children, but maybe their children don't want that. Maybe they want to move into assisted living because they are not capable or they need assistance with activities of daily living. But maybe their spouse doesn't need those kind of support services. So, and I will say, money is often kind of the unspoken concern here. You can have situations where spouses can be concerned that assets spent for the care of the spouse who needs services first may not then be available when that spouse needs them. So I've seen several instances where spouses actually are reluctant to provide services to their own spouses because they're concerned about the impact. And sometimes you have children who are also concerned. They, want to have an inheritance, and they're concerned if resources are allocated to the care of the parents, that they won't be available for them. So, I mean, these are all complicated issues. Now, a certain amount of advanced planning can be done by an individual. They can, of course, do advanced medical directives, execute healthcare proxies, do estate planning, have a designated payee for their Social Security. They can purchase long-term care insurance if they do it early enough. And there are many different sort of types of solutions for people as they age. For example, there's continuing care communities where you can move into independent living and then transition to assisted living or nursing care as your needs require. But again, you have the issue that it's an investment, and you also have the problem that, spouses may not age at the same rate. And So actually, I should have mentioned that I am teaching a module on this topic in a course at Toro Law School on aging. And, I've been to a conference on elder abuse, and it's really rampant. People don't realize how rampant it is. So, and if you own a business, there is certainly a lot that can be done with doing succession planning. I always say, don't confuse succession planning with estate planning. Succession planning is about who will be, running your business when you are not. Estate planning has to do with who will receive the assets you own, either during your life or afterwards. And the two are not necessary, they may not be the same. So I thought I might give some thought or some suggestions as to what are some strategies for resolving intra-family conflicts. I do think that neutral third-party experts can be very helpful to families. And they come in from a variety of fields. Of course, lawyers can be helpful, but what's really important to understand is that lawyers only represent the interests of their clients. And I know many family members put lawyers in difficult positions because they try to influence the lawyer's representation of the client. But nevertheless, they can be helpful, to at least the person who is aging and making the decisions in thinking through those decisions and executing the documents to carry out their own wishes. Medical personnel can be very helpful. For example, and some of what inspired me to kind of branch out into this field was personal experiences I had with my parents as they aged. So, for example, both my parents had Parkinson's disease. And for example, occupational therapists can be very helpful in providing advice as to what kinds of assistive devices or appropriate setting somebody needs in the aging process. So it's not just a question of what the person wants and what their spouse wants and what their children wants, but getting some professional advice from medical personnel can also be helpful in establishing objective criteria for what an appropriate living situation is. There is also a relatively new profession of geriatric care managers. And I used that in connection with both my parents, and they come either from a social work or a nursing background. But I really think they have the best interests of the person, in mind. And they also can be very good at sort of translating the information that people get from doctors or medical professionals and translating it into what does this person need and what are the available resources to fill those needs. And they can facilitate family conversations about what is in the best interests of mom, because that is really the question that needs to, be addressed in the family discussion, and, not with regard to what other individuals want from the situation. Although I will say that it's absolutely reasonable that spouses or children who may be called on to provide support or resources or services, I mean, they also have a say in what it is that they are willing and capable of doing. But at least a geriatric care manager can help the person and the family understand what the needs are. So, another possibility are senior transition specialists who help people find, appropriate living situations. And again, I think bringing in that neutral third party into the situation can be very helpful in, reducing the tension in the situation and providing guidance. Financial advisors or business advisors can also discuss, what should be done with investments, what are the choices with a business. Often, in my view, really the best strategy is to sell the business, because often people go into family businesses out of some sense of responsibility. They may not really be suited for it. And then you have issues about which child is going to be in charge of the family business and what to do about the children who are not interested.
But they're very complicated.
It is really complicated.
Lisa, can I interrupt you a second?
Of course.
All of these professionals that you're talking about are wonderful. I've met more and more over the last few years in the field that I'm in, and they're so great. So the person at home can get a little piece of information and help and guidance from one person. Then they can get a little piece of help and information and resources from another person. Then they can get another piece from a third person, right? So this sounds really, really wonderful. But I'm wondering, is there one person, and is there one person that could guide them in their individual journey, but with their children, with their spouses, with everybody regarding all of these different things? And is that something you're talking about that you help with?
Well, you ask a fantastic question. So I think the person usually has somebody that is their most trusted advisor. So, and they may be the one who's designated to have the power of attorney, for which they have a fiduciary obligation. So it may be that person who is designated. I will say, and you asked such a fantastic question, that I used my own mediation skills often in facilitating conversations among people providing different services and advice regarding my parents' care. I was actually, there are a couple of other models. I also think if somebody has a trusted lawyer, they can help the person gather and put together the information and make a plan. It really needs to be somebody who's going to quarterback the process. And again, if you get a really wonderful geriatric care manager, they may be able to do that too. But you need somebody who's willing to be that trusted advisor to act in the best interests of the person. And of course, if the person may lack capacity, then you may need to have a guardian appointed for them to help make those decisions. There are a couple of other models. There's something that's become very popular now, or becoming popular, called supported decision making, which is the person designates who they want to help them make decisions of different types. My issue is that as people age, their capacity decreases. So it is going to have to be revisited. And I also think there's the coordination problem that you've just alluded to, which is, does it make sense to have one person making healthcare choices or advising on healthcare choices and another person advising on financial choices? You know, the person is, if they need supported decision making, then they're unlikely themselves to be able to synthesize all of this information. The other thing that can be done is you can have a family mediation or family facilitation, where a neutral third party gets all the issues on the table and facilitates a discussion of them all and tries to come up with a resolution that works for everybody. I myself am a mediator. I will say that there are some, red flags about this approach too, because we respect people's ability to make their own decisions. So what if the person involved may either lack some or all capacity? How do you protect that person expressing their wishes and not being overwhelmed by what their spouse, or their children have to say? But part of what mediators are trained to do is making sure everybody gets heard and helping facilitate discussions about solutions. So elder mediation is, another possibility. And I think in the case of both my parents, that I ended up being that trusted advisor who, because I was experienced as an attorney and I understood the idea of a fiduciary duty or a healthcare proxy, which is all about making decisions in the best interest of the person and to accomplish what they otherwise would. I served that function, and my mother anticipated that I would be the right person 30 years ago. But part of the issue is that the people who may have been either nobody's designated, or the person who was designated may try to take advantage of the person because they're losing capacity, they have difficulty carrying out their decisions. So it's a very challenging,
It is, Lisa, but it's a very, very important one. So to give you an example of what I'm thinking in my mind when you're talking about this, I'm thinking of a divorce mediator, right? Because more and more we're hearing of mediators that bring couples together to get through the divorce process and the divorce journey, right? And I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, and so many couples could really utilize that. So I think you're kind of talking about the same type of thing here. A mediator, what would you call that, mediator?
Would be called elder mediation. And
okay.
I don't myself do divorce mediation, but I do a lot of family business mediation. And so in some ways, I came to this as kind of an outgrowth of that, and also representing family members in disputes arising from their participation in business, you know, a family, and a sense that they're not being treated fairly or their interests are not being addressed. But I really think that the presence of a neutral third and knowledgeable third party, and even if the mediator themselves does not have the knowledge, you can bring into the mediation process subject matter experts who can, you know, be part of the process, and share their wisdom with the family so they can get information from different perspectives. I will say, you know, my mother was in a continuing care community, that the people who operate those communities are pretty experienced at dealing with families and helping them navigate transitions from one level of care to another. But again, that addresses part, but not the entire situation.
Yeah, so here's what I've seen. I'm very lucky. I'm an only child, so the decisions I had to make on behalf of my grandmother were pretty simple, pretty straightforward, especially when I had to declare her incompetent. She was unable to make decisions anymore. However, what I see with my friends, unfortunately, you know, when there are siblings involved, you've got one person who usually has the burden of the care, and then the other people are making recommendations, but they're not sharing the responsibility. And then there's a lot of conflict about that. You know, so who's making decisions and who's allowed to, and I should because I'm caring more. There's so many of that. And then they're fighting over the money and this.
Right. Well, again, this is where people doing advanced planning can be very helpful. I mean, my, you know, mother, when she, you know, it was like 30 years ago, she did her estate planning, and she designated who was going to be her power of attorney and healthcare proxy. And to your point that sometimes the burdens are unequally distributed, that is true, but it also, you know, if it's the person's choice and there's no question that they made that choice when they're competent, there was really nothing that the other people can do. Now, not everybody makes those choices up front, and that does generate conflict. The other thing that I would suggest that helps alleviate conflict is also the person who's making the decisions communicate with the family members about the decisions they're making, why they're making it them, so people are not caught off guard. I mean, sometimes you know, you have people making decisions in their will that favors a child who's been sort of the never do well on the theory that they need it more.
Right.
Sometimes the people who are favored are the people who contributed more, and especially to a family business, or who helped out more, and there's a sense they should be rewarded. But it is helpful if the person who's making those decisions communicates that to the family. And I don't practice in the estate planning area, but I too often see, I will say, arrangements that themselves are likely to generate conflict, and also a failure to advise the person or support the person in explaining their wishes to the family.
Mhm.
Well, this sounds like, to me, the bottom line that can resolve all these family issues really would be in the pre-planning, right? Get it done while you're younger, pre-plan all your important things, but then having open and honest communication within each other, within the family members. And I think that all of this conflict between siblings and never speaking to one another again, I think that can be resolved in itself by doing those two things, right?
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
As I said, anticipating the future is difficult. So what happens if the person who's appointed as the power of attorney starts stealing from or not providing the care that's required?
Mhm.
You know, because the decision was made 20 years ago and
Yeah.
the situation may change. And people sometimes, when they're tempted, they can not exercise the good judgment that was expected of them. So,
Well,
or the person named can themselves, and this happens, can themselves start losing capacity.
Mm.
and you have other changes. What about people who are divorced or widowed, and now you have other families, step families, and other,
Yes, I've been through all of that. Yes, and I think the other thing is to maintain communication and you know, and sort of enlist. I think if you share information with people, that you can more often persuade them to do the right thing. That's been my experience. And what, yeah, I don't want to reveal too much about my own personal situation, but
so it is
I
true.
definitely, huh?
It is true that need to update constantly, right? Because things do change, right? Relationships change, and right.
Not only do they change, but also people who are expected to be honest or competent or have the time or willingness to do things may not.
Mhm.
And, I was in a situation with one of my parents that I got a call from a medical professional telling me I had to intervene for her benefit. So these things happen. It's a very difficult situation. I know now the Medicare questionnaire that doctors are required to have their patients fill out asks a lot of information that is relevant to these decisions, both in terms of your own capacity and as to whether your well-being might be adversely affected by anybody close to you. So I do know, I don't know how long they've been collecting that information, but I do know that they are. But of course, what they can do with it is very difficult. It's difficult to say. In the case I'm talking about, the doctor had to get my mother's permission to call me. Because as long as the patient is competent, then the doctor cannot breach that confidence without their permission. And what's also interesting is some of what I think is going on in our society is a function of our culture. We are a very individualistic culture, and we value people making their own decisions very highly, and it's all structured to allow that to happen, even when people might not be able to act in their own self-interest. Other cultures value protecting people more highly, and so the balance is different.
That's a shame, that's sad.
It is, but it's consistent with kind of the way our culture is, where we are individualistic society.
That
Right.
has come up, by the way, a lot of times with my friends about somebody and whether they are able to make decisions on their own. I mean, I knew that my grandmother was unable to that point, but it's not so clear with other people, and even with siblings, try and make that decision and what to do.
No, it is. And actually, the interesting thing about these kinds of decisions is everybody has cognitive biases, even people who are fully competent. We all have an optimism bias. It's not going to happen to me. I'll be fine, right? But then what happens is certain biases become more intense as people age, so that you see people being in denial more as to what their needs are. So they may be legally competent, but these cognitive biases may interfere with,
The decision making.
appropriate decision making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's a thorny area. It really is a very thorny and challenging area.
Yeah.
So what has your specific role been because of your background? How have you handled families who are in conflict?
Well, I get involved in I could be a mediator, I could be an attorney, I could be a trusted friend, and I could I think in my own families, although I wasn't professionally deployed, I used my mediation skills in facilitating the conversations among all the advisors and medical staff to kind of come up with, the best plan for them. And I would also say that I used my mediation skills in maintaining our own family harmony. And actually, in discussions with some of my relatives, I specifically said, I want to do the right thing, but I also want to maintain family harmony. And we called that out as something that we wanted to do. I've been trained I took the training to do the mediation in surrogates court, but I haven't had the chance to do that yet. So I know the kinds of issues that come up with guardianships and estates and things like that. And I'd welcome the opportunity to do that. As I said, I've mediated or acted as settlement counsel in a lot of family business disputes. But I really think that, I'm ready to, and I could be helpful to families in facilitating these kinds of conversations. It's sort of the direction that I'm interested in heading more.
We should make sure we get your contact information. Why don't you tell everyone how to contact you first?
Sure. So again, my name is Lisa Pomerantz. My email address is lisa@lisapom.com. My office phone number is 631-244-1482. And I think you mentioned earlier that I have a monthly newsletter.
Yes.
And it's posted on my website. And if anybody is interested in subscribing to it, they can also contact me and I'll be happy to add them. And I really want to thank you all for this opportunity to explore this thicket, which I've gotten interested in, and understanding what the sources of conflict are and how those of us who are in the conflict resolution field can be helpful to families.
It's a very important role that you play, Lisa.
Yeah.
I see this all the time. And it's just such a shame that people end up, and families end up, where they can't even talk to each other afterwards.
Exactly. So I do think some kind of neutral third party can really be helpful to them. And I hope more families take advantage of them, of
Me
that
too.
approach.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us today, because this is so important for families to know that there is help. You know, there is help and resources out there, but you really have to look for it. You have to want to be committed to keeping the family peace and, you know, searching for the answers that are right for
Your
for
family.
your family.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
Thank you,
thank you
Lisa.
so
We
much.
appreciate
I
it.
really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. Thank you for your expertise,
So
Lisa.
much.
Appreciate it. Okay. Take care.
Thank you. And I hope you join us next week. We'll
Yep.
see you next week. We got another exciting guest coming up.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Bye.